Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are back with another brand new Haolonggood release. This time we've got ourselves the 1/35th scale Styracosaurus, and I'm definitely excited about this one. I think it's an awesome species choice. We've been waiting a little while to see this one from Haolonggood, so really happy to have it now here. I will say I'm surprised that the color schemes on these guys weren't a little flashier. Usually Haolonggood has pretty flashy color schemes. I think as far as this figure goes, prior to me actually opening the box and taking a look at it, I think it's probably one of the least exciting as far as paint apps go, but still looks natural. So again, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I'm used to a little bit more flashiness, but still natural as far as the colorations and stuff go. But you can see the packaging again has the Haolonggood logo, of course the species name and the scale. And then if we actually turn it to the side, Haolonggood, and on the back pretty much the same thing. But up here on the top you can see quite a few other species of ceratopsians that have been released from Haolonggood so far. They're definitely doing a great job when it comes to their ceratopsians and have, in my opinion, produced some of the best ceratopsian figures we have ever seen. So let's pop the box open and check these out. So here are our Styracosaurus, fresh out of the packaging, and my camera not focusing on them. And honestly, they look a lot nicer here in hand, out of the packaging, than they did when it comes to the original, prototype images and stuff. The original images of them for the listings were pretty decent, but I feel like this is one of those situations where the figures in hand end up looking a lot nicer than the original images led us to believe they would. So I think I'll start with this one because I'm going to go ahead on record right now as saying that this is definitely my favorite of the two. So if we start up here at the head sculpt, you can see the head sculpt looks gorgeous, especially when it comes to the fine detail. They've done a great job on the skin texture and everything. If we get really nice and close, you can see how darn nice the skin texture looks. There's lots of fine detail throughout. Easily one of the best looking Styracosaurus head sculpts I've seen when it comes to skin texture and fine detail. There's also some really nice paintwork throughout. You can see quite a bit of variation as well as quite a bit of depth to the color, giving this definitely a very realistic look when it comes to the paint apps. We can see a little bit of a darker tone there as you lead out into the beak. The beak as well sports some very impressive detailing. We can even see a little pink inside the nostrils, which is a really nice, really small touch. As you lead up, you can see the eyes are painted with a yellow, given a black pupil. They are slightly sloppy as far as the paintwork goes, but not too bad. Leading up into the horn itself also has some very impressive detailing to it, and you can see we start out with a darker tone and transition nice and naturally to a lighter tone as you lead out into the horn again a little bit further. Leading up into the frill, we can see some darker tones that actually run through the eye area and then kind of start to spot and scatter as you lead up into the frill. But there's also like a light grayish tone right here, which we can see showing up in a few other areas right here on the top of the head and then back up here on the top of the frill as well. There are also some really subtle browns that you can see showing up here, and some pretty cool designs, almost having like the look of eyes here in the center of the frill with a very light gray and then a black, and then there's also a black that sort of outlines that area. But you can see the black that we see right here leading back, kind of speckles and just patterns up and around the upper part of the frill with a lighter gray moving through that area. And then moving up into the horns as well, you can see again we have that nice darker tone that very smoothly transitions to a lighter tone and looks really good. I think the actual paintwork, especially of this one, is honestly fantastic. Everything is really smooth as far as the application of the paint, as far as the transitions go, and is easily one of the nicest looking versions of a Styracosaurus I personally have ever seen. As we move back into the neck, you can see the paintwork continues to look extremely impressive. We can also see some tensing in the neck of the dinosaur as we lead back, but you've got quite a bit of different variations of color, including kind of like a grayish, like a darker grayish wash it looks like potentially, and then you have like some brownish tones, almost actually like a slight hint of pink on the underside of the Styracosaurus. The skin texture continues to look nice as we lead back. There we go. Now finally really focusing. There is some dry brushing that you'll see here and there. We can kind of see some dry brushing moving over the top with like a light gray. We also have a striping effect moving down along the back of the Styracosaurus. And as you move down into the side, again, one of the things I think I'm most impressed with when it comes to this one is all of the variation of color, because we could see light grays and really nice browns. You've got some black kind of spotting through, a little bit darker browns right here. They've done a really good job of applying a good bit of variation to the color of this, and really nice realistic application of the paint. As we lead down into the front leg, you can get a nice sense of how muscular the figure is and how muscular the dinosaur is. We can see like a really large sort of like osteoderm right there. Leading down, you've got the elbow sculpted out, and we can see that we transition to a darker tone leading down into the foot. We've got the wrist sculpted nicely. Nice wrinkling and creasing there to the skin in the wrist, leading down into the toes. They as well are pretty nicely sculpted. We've got the nails painted right there. You can see how this foot is basically, I think, just kind of landing down on the ground as the other foot is lifting up off of the ground. So showing the walking motion of our Styracosaurus, you can see a little bit more of that kind of like pinkish brown tone down here on the underside of the figure. Leading back up into the stomach, we can see a little more variation of color, as well as quite a bit of wrinkling and creasing to the skin of the stomach leading back into the thigh. We also have the hip bone kind of protruding from the skin right there. Pretty impressive musculature here on the thigh. Just in general, a pretty impressive size, of course, for the thigh. Ceratopsians always have really quite big, thick thighs, and you can definitely see that here on the Styracosaurus. You've also got, again, that darker brown leading down along the front of the leg with just, little bits of variation of color throughout. You can even see more of that kind of light brown on the back of the thigh, some more of the light gray moving down the back of the thigh as well. The foot sculpt looks really quite nice. The nails, again, painted with that black, which does have a little bit of a satin shine to it. And then we lead up, we've got a few more wrinkles right back here behind the thigh, and then a nice little tail as we lead out with a little bit of a curve to it. You can see the striping does end as we lead out, and then we basically just have a mixture of browns and grays out there for the tail. Moving along the underbelly of the Styracosaurus, we can see, again, quite a bit of variation of color to the underside, as well as quite a bit of really impressive detailing. The skin texture looks great. We've got the cloaca sculpted out back there as you lead along the underbelly. It looks very well done. And then for the most part, it's going to look the same over here as it did on the first side, but of course the biggest difference would be the positioning of the legs, as both legs are kind of held closer together on this side, again showing off the walking motion. So you'll see a little bit of difference as far as like the skin wrinkles and folds, like right here in front of the thigh. We can kind of see the thigh sort of pushing into the stomach of the Styracosaurus as the dinosaur is walking along, so you've got some nice wrinkling and creasing there. Same deal back here, except kind of the opposite, because you have like stretching rather than wrinkling on this area, because the skin would be stretching here off of the tail. But it is absolutely a gorgeous, gorgeous Styracosaurus. I feel like now I underestimated how nice this figure was going to look in hand, because it actually is a whole lot nicer than I was expecting it to be. Then we've also got the other color variant, because as per usual, when it comes to Haolonggood, they usually give us two different color variants. This one has a little bit of a flashier look. As you lead up into the face, you have all sorts of variation of color, again with different greens and lighter shades of like orangish browns, as well as darker browns moving along the beak. You can see a little bit of a lighter tone moving over the tip of the beak as well, kind of like a light gray. And then as we move out, you can see the eyes are painted with a yellow and a black pupil, which does have a nice gloss coat. Pretty much the same thing we did see on the other Styracosaurus. We do have a darker tone there around the eye, but it's a little more subtle as far as the application of that compared to what we see on the other Styracosaurus. We have those same sort of speckles moving up and over the frill though, but we have that light gray that actually leads up into a really cool light bluish green, and that coloration definitely looks nice and absolutely pops, again making this one, in my opinion, a little bit of a flashier version compared to the other one. We almost have the same design up there, except rather than like the two-eyed look that we kind of had when it comes to the patterning on the frill, this one actually has four, because we have two on each side, whereas the other one only had one on each side. So a little difference as far as that goes. But there's all sorts of variation to the scales, something I feel like I didn't mention when we were looking at the other one up here on the frill, which looks really cool. And again, you can see variation of color leading up into the spikes on the back of the frill here, again with different variations of lighter tones and grays and even browns. And of course, if we take a look at it from the other side, it's going to look pretty much the same. But as we move back into the body, we have a lot of greens back here. Slightly different shades, but for the most part, they're all kind of similar as far as the shades of greens. But you also have these very cool orangish browns as you move down into the lower part of the stomach. Same deal back here in the back of the thigh and in the throat. Little bit of a darker tone here for the actual underbelly of our Styracosaurus. You can see those orangish browns again kind of meet up back here in the tail and then disappear again as you lead out further into the tail. We have darker tones as you lead down into the feet. There are also some really nice dry brushing techniques that have been applied to this figure that you can see showing up here and there. Again, a little bit more dry brushing moving over the back as well. We have that striping effect leading along the back of this one, but not nearly as intense as we saw on the other Styracosaurus. Outside of that, I don't really think there's a whole lot of difference. Obviously, we have, just like the other one, some of the darker tones that kind of pattern down and spot in a few different areas. Not as much as you see on the other one, but they are there, and again, they're also applied a little bit more subtle compared to what we see on the other one. But an equally as nice Styracosaurus, though I think I am a little bit more partial to this version, just a little bit more. But since this is the one that we have here currently, we might as well go ahead and measure that one. So for a size, you're looking at about just a hair under 6 inches or around 15 centimeters. And then for a height to the top of the horn here on the frill, about 2 3/4 inches or just a hair over 7 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, Robert Muldoon in the Collect Day human being next to our Haolonggood Styracosaurus. And you can see that the Styracosaurus is actually a little bit smaller than I personally was expecting. I am surprised to see that it is a bit on the smaller side. Maybe I'm just used to Styracosaurus figures being a little larger, but I assumed at 1/35th scale that the species was a bit larger than this, but maybe I'm just not familiar enough with the species. I'm not sure. But regardless, you can see again, it is a fairly small figure overall. And for another comparison that I feel like is definitely quite interesting, we have the Schleich which you can see the Schleich is actually a bit larger than the Styracosaurus. Then if we bring in the PNSO version of the Styracosaurus, you can see again the Haolonggood version is a bit smaller, quite a bit smaller actually, than the PNSO version, and I think the PNSO version as well was 1/35th scale, though I may need to refresh my memory. I'm not entirely sure on that, but I believe it is also 1/35th scale, so maybe this, again, is taken from a smaller specimen. I'm not too sure. Again, if you guys know more about it, definitely let me know in the comments section, because I would love to know, but you can obviously see the PNSO version is a bit larger. And then we're going to see the same thing again if we bring in the Papo Styracosaurus, which obviously is quite a bit larger than our Haolonggood version. And then for just a few random Haolonggood ceratopsian comparisons, here we have the Xenoceratops, which you can see is kind of similar in size to the Styracosaurus, but just a little bit bigger. We also have the Utah Ceratops, which you can now see is quite a bit larger than the Styracosaurus, as well as the Nasutoceratops, which is just a little bit larger than the Styracosaurus as well. And then finally, we have the Diabloceratops, which this time you can see is a little bit smaller than our Styracosaurus from Haolonggood. So these brand new Haolonggood Styracosaurus figures are both actually really nicely done. I think, again, I'm partial to the gray and brown version, but I think they both look really good. And overall, Haolonggood definitely delivered on this release. I will say, though, as I've already mentioned in the review, it's probably one of the less exciting paint schemes, but at the same time, in hand, I feel like it looks a lot nicer than I was initially giving it credit for. When I had seen the original images of it again from Haolonggood, I was a little let down as far as the paint apps go, but having it in hand, I can say it looks very natural, very realistic, and definitely looks like it could be the colors of a Styracosaurus. So I have to give them props again, and definitely admit that I was wrong. Even though it is a little bit less flashy than most of their ceratopsians, it is still really impressive and really nicely done, very naturalistic, great application of the paint, and maybe it's just nice that it is this way, because at least it's a little bit of a different look compared to a lot of their other ceratopsians that usually have very flashy colors, whereas these don't have so much flashiness but still have a very natural look. The sculpts are really well done, definitely one of the nicest sculpted Styracosaurus that I've ever seen. It's nothing too crazy as far as the pose, just basically a nice walking pose, looking really good. You know, the detailing is all there exactly like you would like to see with skin wrinkles and folds and stuff. It's also extremely crisp and impressive when it comes to how darn nice the detailing looks on these figures. I feel like the Haolonggood figures, when it comes to their fine detail, just gets better and better with every release. And it's also a little bit smaller than I was expecting, but still really nicely sized, and definitely a nice conveniently sized Styracosaurus for any collection. So if you are interested in adding one to your collection, I will include a link in the description to where you can do that from Lana Time Shop, because that is exactly where I got mine. So make sure you check that link, pick these up for sure, and like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.